Hello, Jordan Chariton live. Status Coup. It is Friday, June 23rd, 2023, right here in the United Corporations of America. And boy, can you think of a better term for a corporation that intentionally and unnecessarily nukes a small town to save a couple $1,000,000? Well, looks like that's what we have found out over the last 24 hours. Yesterday, in a quick kind of 20-minute segment, we went through the bombshells that were revealed in the hearing yesterday. That would be the Norfolk Southern investigative hearing held by the National Transportation Safety Board. This is the first investigative hearing held since the derailment and detonation that happened in February. We're now almost 5 months since this happened. Lewis, who unfortunately is, well, good for him, he deserves it, is on vacation right now. But Lewis has been doing a lot of investigative work and obviously consistent reporting in East Palestine. He's gone there 3 times. I've been doing reporting and investigative reporting, but I watched quite a lot of this 9-hour hearing yesterday. There is day 2. It's a 2-day hearing. There is day 2 is going on right now of the hearing. But I think based on yesterday and some of what I saw today, we can really go through a lot of, I do not think it's overselling it, bombshells that were revealed, which to me, all due respect to the 24/7 submarine watch, obviously, tragically, it seems the 5 people on that submarine lost their lives. So not minimizing that, but I'm pretty sure when it's revealed and evidence is revealed that an American town was intentionally sacrificed by a multi-billion-dollar corporation to open up the railroad track sooner. I don't know, maybe in a sane world, that would be the leading news story in America, not a submarine that was lost. But I digress. So we're going to go through that. We have a guest who I think is going to be able to offer some expertise, particularly on the fire end. And yeah, we'll get your thoughts. Before I went live, I published a piece in Substack titled 5 Bombshells Revealed from the Investigative Hearing. So that link is in the description. Definitely read through. It's a little long, but it has all the video. Thank you to Colin for cutting those clips from the hearing. Please smash the like button, share this live stream so we can get it out to more people. Tina will be live at 5 o'clock Eastern with a guest, and they will be going through, shall we say, as the RFK insanity turns. More insanity coming from RFK Jr., quote unquote, the anti-establishment RFK Jr. But let's get into the hearing. Again, these top 5 bombshells are from parts of the hearing yesterday and today. Joining me is Jack Vankirk. You were a firefighter with the Chippewa, Pennsylvania department for 14 years. So you and I have talked off camera quite a bit. And a lot of the things we kind of suspected, I would say, were confirmed yesterday and today. We're going to kind of build up. We're not going to get to like the most scandalous thing until the end. So let's start because I thought this was really suspicious and interesting. This was explained yesterday. Colin, let's show the clip where the head of the NTSB is outlining the time it took for Norfolk Southern to send the manifest, which obviously if you have firefighters responding to a fire and there's hazardous chemicals on the train, you would want to get the first responders the information on those chemicals immediately so that they could have the proper PPE, masks, and everything else on so that they're not inhaling hazardous, cancerous chemicals. Let's take a look at this exchange and we'll respond on the back end.
Whose responsibility is it to maintain and provide the train consist?
The railroad will provide the train consist.
Mm-hmm. And earlier, I think we were hearing that it was the responsibility of the crew, though.
Yeah, the crew's The crew will provide the consist. The dispatcher in Atlanta can provide the consist, and you have the potential of getting it off AskRail if you have AskRail.
Okay, so the crew can provide the consist. The railroad has a responsibility to provide the train consist. Okay. What time did you arrive on scene?
Might have been around 11:30. The video I shot was like 11:45, so I'm guessing around 11:30, somewhere in there.
Okay. And Chief Drabeck, I agree with you. It is not the fire service's responsibility to drive a mile up and find a train crew while they're trying to deal with a terrible incident. It is the railroad's responsibility to maintain that and provide that information according to federal regulations. So just reading through all the transcripts of the interviews, so East Palestine Dispatch did call Norfolk Southern at 9:04 p.m. in Atlanta to obtain information about the derailment. 9:04. I want you to keep that in mind. NS said they'd have to call him back. Another call was placed at 9:30 by East Palestine Dispatch to Norfolk Southern about whether they should start evacuations. I'm not sure whether they got return calls, but the timeline for the consist itself shows that Columbiana County Emergency Management Agency received the consist via email from Norfolk Southern at 9:56 p.m., basically a full hour later. The deputy chief of East Palestine, 9:45:10. Chief Jones didn't receive the consist until 10:23 and had to get it from SEMA, I think, or the Columbiana County Emergency Management Agency. The East Palestine Police Department didn't receive the consist until 1:30 a.m., and the East Palestine Fire Chief here found the printed train consist at the command post at 2:15 a.m., sitting on a desk. Can you explain why it took so long to get the train consist to those that are responsible not just for protecting their own firefighters, but for and protecting those in the community, but for making sure that they were able to fight what they were facing?
I'm unaware of the dispatch center calls from East Palestine to NS. I'm not aware of that. When I got a call from EMA Director Clark, I then sent the consist that I received while I was en route to the scene. It is the railroad's responsibility to provide that train consist.
Thank you. Julie, can you pull up the exhibit? Who is CTEH, Mr. Deutsch?
They're a contractor that does air monitoring for us.
Do you want it to start at page 1?
Sure.
Exhibit A.
Should go back to the email. Hopefully it's there. There was an email that was circulated by Norfolk Southern to CTEH, your contractors that were part of the emergency cleanup, at 9:08 p.m., providing the train consist to your contractors. How is it that Norfolk Southern could provide the contractors responsible for cleanup with the information within 12 minutes of the derailment and took an hour to several hours before providing it to emergency responders?
In this email, that was our IH department sending it to the air monitoring contractors who are based in Arkansas to bring monitoring equipment based on the chemicals that were in the derailment. I can't explain the time frame.
Obviously, that was a bit of a longer clip, but I wanted to play the whole thing because you were a first responder. Is it like this difficult thing for the railroad, which knew about the derailment within a few minutes, to just punch up the contact for the East Palestine Fire Department and get it to them right away? Or, the police department? Seems that they could get it to their contractor, CTEH, who, by the way, has quite a reputation for questionable credibility, I should say. CTEH, I don't know what it stands for, but they're kind of the go-to air tester for all these corporations. BP used them after the Deepwater Horizon spill. The New York Times had a piece about CTEH. They always seem to find nothing wrong and always seem to find exactly what the company who's paying them wants them to find or not find. So what does it say to you if you were a first responder and you found out that there was an hour delay for even the deputy fire chief, who at that point was in command because the fire chief was out of town for a few hours? What does that say?
It's inexcusable, the process of events that went on that night. Again, the multiple train derailments that I've been involved with, especially with hazardous chemicals being transported in the cars. The either the engineer or the conductor have both responded directly to emergency services with a manifest of what is inside those cars. And even if for whatever reason they had to, move the engine further up the rail away from the incident, they still should have immediately contacted emergency services dispatch, immediately given them, again, a list of the manifests of chemicals that were on the train. To me, this is it's absolutely inexcusable. To me, it sounds like, again, they knew something was going on prior to the incident. And in my mind, the steps that they took were to cover their own butt and not necessarily focus on the emergency services that were on hand dealing with the situation. None of it makes absolute no sense whatsoever. I'm completely just blown away at the series of events that took place that night. It's unreal. I mean, again, it seems like they're doing everything they can to cover their own butt for a mistake that they knew they could have prevented.
Is it too cynical of me that if you're first sending it to your internal contractors and you don't send it to a first responder for at least an hour, that maybe there's some deliberations going on what to share and what not to share in terms of what's on that train?
I 100% agree with you. I feel as though that's exactly what went on. And even after the incident, I tried to make contact with several of friends of mine that are still in the departments up there, trying to get them to help out with air monitoring inside local residents' houses. And according to them, even after the incident, they were not allowed to go in and do any type of air monitoring. It had to all be done specifically by these companies that were hired by either the EPA or Norfolk Southern, which, I mean, again, to me, absolutely blows my mind. I mean, either they're trying to hide something or whatever else, but why would you not allow local emergency services to go into these houses and make sure that the air is clean for these people to go back into their residence and live there, even after they deemed it clear to go into these residents? I mean, friends of mine are still to this day having symptoms of the chemicals that got put into the air. It's absolutely mind-blowing.
And what I find interesting, not that you're a railroad worker, but so what I've been told, it's not necessarily illegal, but these chemicals, especially the hazardous ones, are supposed to be grouped together on the train.
Yes.
Four of these vinyl chloride cars were together. I think it was car 26 to 29, but the fifth one was like 24 cars back. So again, I've heard different things speaking with different people, but I don't think that's illegal. But I also think because of precision railroading and we got to do everything quick. And I've talked to rail workers who say they don't give us enough time to actually put the train together the way it should be put together, with chemical A all together. A lot of times we'll have, like, if you have these hazardous chemicals, one of them will be, or more than one, they'll be split up, and we'll just change it in the digital system to group them all together. So that's part of what I was theorizing, is maybe they were like, oh shit, we got the vinyl chloride is not together.
Right.
And that might have been the delay in communicating it, because maybe they were, discussing that, or, how to deal with that fact. I'm not sure. But what I do know, it seems like it's not been covered in the news that much, but the first responders, it's not like a few are sick. You're talking about a lot of firefighters who are experiencing serious health issues in addition to the residents. And that potentially could have been avoided if right away they knew to put on the proper PPE so they're not breathing this stuff in, correct?
Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
Absolutely. All right, let's get to the next thing. And again, smash the like button. The piece that I wrote with these different clips is in the description. So the next one I found pretty interesting. It again goes to the fact that these cars aren't being inspected for the most part. But Norfolk Southern never inspected the car when it got the car in Illinois, all the way up to the derailment, even though there was evidence that one of the wheel bearings was failing. They could have stopped it and had a mechanical, engineer inspect it, but they did not. If we could play that clip, Colin.
Cox, the FRA's requirements for railcar inspections are specified in FRA CFR Part 49, CFR 49 Part 215 and Appendix D. Briefly describe the differences between the Part 215 and the Appendix D railcar inspections in terms of what gets inspected and who is authorized to perform the inspections. Mr. Cox?
Yes. Thank you. Under 215, the group of people called Carmen are authorized to do the safety inspections. They are a group of safety inspectors, and under Appendix D, the train crews can do the inspection. I actually have a printout of 215 here. I believe it's Exhibit E22 in your record. But this here represents 215, which the Carmen are extensively trained in. And out of that entire example, only this small section and the small section at the bottom of this page is what the train crews inspect. All in all, on a freight car, you're looking at anywhere from 90 to 105 points of inspection per side of a freight car, depending on what type of freight car we're talking about, whereas the Appendix D only hits on 12 points. It is meant to be a very limited type of inspection to get the car to a safety inspection point. In addition to that, to outline the type of training that these safety inspectors have, these highly qualified inspectors, under 215, they are issued these wheel gauges. And they use these wheel gauges in order to assess the total health of the freight car, something that is never issued to a freight train crewman.
Is there a difference in the purpose of the two types of inspections?
Yes, the 215 that the Carmen does is supposed to assess the total health of the freight car, whereas the Appendix D is just supposed to be a stopgap to get the freight car to an inspection point. Unfortunately, in today's rail structure, the railroads have gotten larger, there are less railroads, and there are less interchange points. Therefore, the Appendix D has become more and more the primary inspection on these cars instead of the detailed inspection under the 215 by the qualified mechanical inspector.
And what are the differences in the qualifications and what type of training is required to perform each type of inspection?
There is testing yearly on air brakes and mechanical defects, and the carmen are required by the federal regulation to go through this type of training very regularly. The train
In Madison, Illinois, on the first car, what type of inspections were performed on the first car to derail from when Norfolk Southern first received the car in Madison, Illinois, up to the train derailment in East Palestine?
My understanding of the record, when Norfolk and Southern first received the car, there was no inspection done. So the car came from another railroad, and traditionally there would be an interchange inspection and the cars would be looked at, but as I've said, there's less and less Class 1 carriers, and therefore they are relying more on the Appendix D. This car came into Decatur, Illinois, passed through Toledo, Ohio, where it stopped, Cleveland, Ohio, where it stopped, and passed through Bellevue, Ohio on their system. There are qualified mechanical inspectors at all these points, and they were not allowed to inspect this car at any of those locations.
Thank you. Regarding the types of rail car inspections in yards, what does the term ghost tracks refer to? Mr. Cox, do you know if Norfolk Southern has addressed the FRA administrator's concern?
And do the detailed inspections. Their response was, this letter says I do not have to do this, therefore Norfolk and Southern is not going to do this.
Mr. Hopewell, has Norfolk Southern responded to the September 22 letter from the FRA administrator?
I'm not aware. I'm not aware of this letter or our status on a response to it. Sorry.
Can you find out for us, please?
I can.
Can I ask who here would be able to ask that question, answer that question?
I would have to consult with the rest of my colleagues who are here if someone's read in on that topic.
Thank you.
Mr. Cox, did a Norfolk Southern employee inspect the rail car from the time when Norfolk Southern received it up to the derailment in East Palestine, whether it be a carman inspection or a train crew inspection?
For clarity, you're talking about the car that burned off the journal?
Yes.
The answer is no.
Thank you.
So long clip, but necessary. Essentially, Norfolk Southern did not at all inspect the car when they got it in Illinois, particularly the car with the wheel bearing that was overheating and failed, which that was the first car that derailed, and we believe the source of the derailment. Their dispatch could have told them to stop at any point because they knew that wheel bearing was overheating long before East Palestine, but they did not. Again, you're not a railroad worker, but I mean, if your fire truck is sparking while you're driving, you might stop. What are your thoughts on that?
To me, it's just blatant negligence. It sounds like, I mean, I know a lot of people have brought up, the whole safety regulations getting reduced during the past administration and the presidency and everything like that. But even if that were the case, if I were the owner of this company, why would you dumb down your safety standards, especially whenever you're transporting billions of dollars and, they want to sit here and talk about speed and everything like that. Again, to me, this is just, it's blatant negligence. They're more worried about the money than they are the safety of their crew and the residents of the towns that these trains are going through. I mean, it's unbelievable. Like, I can't even fathom the amount of mess ups that have happened in this whole process. It absolutely blows my mind, especially again, the initial reports of them knowing about this wheel bearing going bad and them going through 3 to 4 stops prior to the derailment and them not addressing it or bringing it up or doing anything to try and fix it. They wanted to keep the process going because all they see is dollar signs. That's it.
And if we're connecting dots from the first thing we talked about, this basically hour delay in getting first responders the manifest of the hazardous chemicals, I don't know, maybe it has to do with the fact that, oh shit, we should have stopped the train like 30 to 60 miles earlier. So maybe we could get away with this without anyone knowing what's on the train. Do you think?
Absolutely. And again, even if they knew, that obviously eventually it would get out what was on that train, but it sounds like they were immediately taking steps to try and, like I had mentioned earlier, cover their own butt and try to basically reduce their responsibility in this whole incident. And
Right.
To me, obviously, they've been caught with their pants down. And I mean, there's no way that they can get away with this. I mean, if they get away with this, it'll be just completely mind blowing. Because I mean, if you put everything together, it's nobody else's fault. It really isn't. I mean, there's been a whole lot of back and forth, including the whole blowing up of the rail cars and everything like that. But none of this would have happened if Norfolk Southern would have done their job and they would have made sure that those rail cars were in a safe manner to travel.
Right. And not I don't know your politics, doesn't matter, but I would say this is why part of why railroad workers wanted to go on strike last year. And
Absolutely.
you had a president that blocked it right before the midterm elections, citing the economy. Obviously, he blocked it because it would be very bad for Democrats to have a strike that will affect all of the economy while the economy was already shaky. But I'm not saying if that strike happens, this wouldn't have happened. Who knows? But I am saying I spoke with railroad workers before when that was all going on. And one of the major things they were talking about was this deregulation, two men per crew for 150 trains, brakes that were as old as the Civil War era. Basically this precision railroading, which they're not going to tell you to stop the train unless the crew is on fire. And maybe they wouldn't even tell you to stop the train then either. So these things, that was kind of discussed in the political realm of, Biden is blocking a railroad strike, but it has life or death consequences, this deregulation. And now it has potentially generational consequences because you have people in a small town and other areas, this is not just East Palestine, that unfortunately are having all sorts of health problems. And we're probably going to see cancer over the next 5 to 10 years. There is responsibility, of course, Norfolk Southern, but the president, Democrats, any politician that thought, we'll just kick the can down the road and, look, now we've gotten them a couple sick days. Biden's doing a victory lap today because finally they made a deal for sick days. Well, the first responders are certainly going to need the sick days when they have cancer from this. Let's play the next clip, which is very short and I think just absolutely insane. This is the fire chief, Keith Drabick, who was not there, I think, for about 4 or 5 hours. He was on a scheduled vacation, so I'm not going to knock him. You're not going to know that there's going to be a derailment. So he was out of town. I think he got back at like 2 a.m.
Right.
This whole time, the narrative has been he was the incident commander and he made the final decision. I think that's bullshit. But let's hear how much time he was given to make that decision to basically detonate these cars.
Ultimate decision to approve the vent and burn.
The final yes was given by me based on the consensus of everybody in the unified command that there was no other option. No objections were given to that during that meeting, where no other options were given at that point. So as a consensus of the meeting, it was the final okay was given by me as the incident commander based on the consensus of the unified command.
And how much time were you given to make the decision to approve the vent and burn?
When we got taken down to that room, we were told we had 13 minutes to make the decision, and that had to do with convergence with the weather and the transitioning from day to night and the product and its believed to be what state it was in and the process it was going through.
So this is your lane. I'm not calling the fire chief a dummy, but you're not necessarily a chemist if you're a fire chief. You obviously have to be trained and know a lot, but I would want real specialists to be deciding whether this is about to polymerize, meaning the cars are heating up to the point that the chemicals are expanding and might explode. When I hear they gave me 13 minutes, I don't know about you, but that makes me think if they're only giving you 13 minutes, they think it might explode like now, which then is like, why the hell are you all here? Wouldn't you want to get out of town if you think the trains are that close to, the chemicals are that close to exploding?
Right.
What are your thoughts on he was given 13 minutes to make this decision?
Well, first off, I want to start off by saying, Keith is a very dear, good friend of mine. He was actually one of my mentors whenever I was in the fire department in Chippewa. I know for a fact he's a very educated man. He's an amazing firefighter, amazing fire chief. He was a firefighter down here in Myrtle Beach in Horry County for several years. If they are saying that he was the final determining factor in the decision making of them detonating these cars, if that's the case, then he was fed a lot of BS prior to making that decision. I find it very hard to believe, especially in a situation like this. Again, I know Keith is a highly educated man, even whenever it comes to hazardous materials, but more experienced experts who I know for a fact were on scene should have been making those decisions. And ultimately, I feel like they did. And they just basically passed the buck on to him to voice the final decision and maybe use him as a scapegoat, perhaps. But
well, we know we'll get to it in a bit, but we know the actual manufacturer of the chemical was there and telling them, yeah, the cars are not about to they're not about to explode.
Yeah,
and they were basically cut out of the decision making.
Again, and the graphs that we've seen with the decreasing of the temperatures from the point of the derailment all the way to the detonation, there's absolutely nothing that adds up that equals them having to detonate these rail cars the way they did, especially going from one rail car to finding out that they detonated 5. No, I don't believe it for 1 minute that Keith was the final determining factor of them detonating those rail cars. I can almost guarantee you that he was fed information from more expertise people that were on scene prior to him making that decision.
From what it sounds like, and we'll get to the clip, the only communication between the manufacturer of the chemicals, who I would trust the most because they made the chemicals, they would know how they react and how hot it needs to be for them to blow up and yada, yada. It seems that the only people they got to talk to were Norfolk Southern. I don't think the fire chief was being told information from the chemical manufacturer. It seems Norfolk Southern cut the chemical manufacturer out of the emergency response because the chemical manufacturer wasn't on board with what they seemed to want to do, which was blow things up. And why that 13-minute thing matters, when he's saying they only gave us 13 minutes, we also know from other reporting, Norfolk Southern wanted to do this at noon on Monday. While school was in session, there was no way to know at that point what percentage of that 1 mile had evacuated. So they wanted rush, which, again, the only reason you would want to do it so quickly or say, hey, you got 13 minutes is if you have like thermal readings that say, hey, these temperatures are at, according to the manufacturer, they needed to be at 320 degrees to polymerize. At the height of it, I think it was at like 130, 140. Yeah. So it just doesn't make sense. And it seems that we have a big problem. That's why I have the flag behind me. We have corporations running things, not government. And it seems that corporation was running things, not the EPA, not any government entity, certainly not the mayor. And the fire chief, I trust, what you're saying about him. Seems like he was trying to make the best decisions based on probably some manipulation of the facts he was fed.
Yeah. And again, especially in a situation like this, decisions like that, they're not made within a 13-minute time span. As soon as this incident happened, they are already in the process of coming up with a plan A, plan B, plan C. Determining if this happens, we got to do this. If this happens, we got to do this. That was happening hours, if not a day, before the decision to detonate even happened. And again, if these chemicals were put inside the proper rail cars, it should have been, again, a jacketed rail car, which has a tank within a tank to exactly prevent thermal, barrier and create overheating of whatever is inside of that rail car. And from the pictures that I've seen and the videos and everything like that, there was no evidence of that being compromised in any way. Especially, again, they detonated 4 of these rail cars, and it just didn't. Again, none of it makes any sense whatsoever. Absolutely none. Good.
Now we're going to get to the real smoking gun shit, where who's going to prison. By the way, I called the Attorney General of Ohio's office before this morning. I don't know. Were you watching? Were you watching this? Because right now they're suing civilly. Yeah, money's good for the residents and the first responders, but it ain't gonna fight it's not gonna prevent cancer.
Yeah.
And it's not gonna stop the next corporation from doing this. So people need to be criminally held accountable if they intentionally went against basic engineering, chemistry, and all that to more quickly open these tracks. And I spoke with a longtime fireman earlier. He said the alternative to the vent and burn was something called a hot box or hot something, where you basically, it's a process and you're extracting the chemicals from the car. He said that might have taken a week longer to do that. So we're talking about a week of the track shutdown, an additional week. Seems that they rushed this to blow up the chemicals to save a week's worth of money. I mean, that is beyond sociopath. That's psychopathy to do that.
Absolutely. 100% right.
So if you missed the hearing, let's get to these next two clips, which are the top two bombshells. I showed this yesterday, but we were kind of rushed, so I'm going to show it again. And this is what Jack was referring to, which was Norfolk Southern said the cars were heating up to the point that there could have been an uncontrolled explosion. But the NTSB, to their credit, by the way, because the government a lot of times helps these agencies cover it up. NTSB seems like they did a real investigation and they're not fucking around. And they're trying at least to hold Norfolk Southern accountable. Let's play this clip, which they show that the temperatures were going down, not up around the cars.
Mr. Wood, this is a graph that we constructed of the tank shell temperature measurements collected by your contractor, SPSI. The red arrow on the left is where you told us the temperature had risen to 138 Fahrenheit, and then you decided that a vent and burn was necessary. Is that correct?
I would say when we became concerned about the temperature rise, that we believed that our only alternative left was probably going to be a vent and burn. And those were the words that I relayed.
Yes, okay. Would you explain what was happening during the rest of this temperature trend? And this is for tank car OCPX 80370. Well, what was going on during the rest of this time period leading up to the vent and burn?
Again, all through the night on Sunday, we were taking hourly temperatures that were being recorded. Again, I ran nighttime operations there, so I was the one, either myself or John Simpson, were recording these temperatures and relaying them on to Unified Command. The temperatures basically fluctuated all night. Then the next morning came in place during the time where we felt like a vent and burn was going to have to take place. We had our contractors making preparations in case that decision was made. That's basically what took place through the night.
Okay, would you agree that with the exception of the one spike in temperature during the middle of the night, it appears that the temperature was on a downward or decreasing trend, looking at this graph?
Looking at the graph, I would agree that that was the data we were receiving from an external temperature of a tank that I would in no way think is an accurate temperature, the core temperature of that car.
Okay. And well, that gets into the next question then. Why was this tank car still a concern when its temperature was decreasing?
I will say the car was a concern because of our original concerns of it. It's not just polymerization that's necessary, a reason why this car was rendered nothing else could be done with it. Mechanical damage, the sheer amount of heat damage to the valves and the tank car also have to be considered. So just an external temperature on a tank with a slow downward trend in very cold temperatures. Again, polymerization is not necessarily the only thing that would concern us about a high pressure car, that it's sustained these type of damages.
So did it suggest to you that polymerization was continuing, or are you saying that potentially it wasn't? I'm not understanding your answer.
My answer is there's no way to tell for sure based strictly on an external temperature of the tank. That doesn't discount any of the other problems that are a concern of that tank, from heat damage and mechanical damage, because this is a pressurized liquefied flammable gas inside this car, aside from the polymerization. There are circumstances where that's a hazard, whether polymerization is going on or not.
I'm not understanding his answer either, because it just sounds like a lot of fucking words to me. Yeah, of course there's other concerns, but when you're talking about detonating cancerous chemicals over a small town, isn't the top concern the polymerization, which again is how hot the chemicals are getting, how much they're expanding, and whether they're close to combusting.
Saying is there standard operating procedures that are SOPs, then why haven't they done this at any other train derailment involving hazardous materials and explosive chemicals? The derailment that I was at back in 2006, the rail cars that were leaking were carrying ethanol, which again is a insanely highly combustible liquid, and that wasn't even considered. I've tried to do several hours of research over the past 2 days trying to find evidence of a railroad company in America detonating rail cars to prevent a mass explosion, and I can't find any evidence of it whatsoever. And them bringing up, the readings of the external temperature of the tanks, if that itself is lowering in temperature, and these tanks are supposed to, on top of the external side of the tank, have a thermal barrier that further protects the containment from heating up and exploding, that none of that makes any sense.
And also, when they're saying things like, we felt like a vent and burn was going to have to take place, well, based on what? We felt it, the temperature, and it's also, it kind of gives me like just like a fake news kind of impression. Like if you're not getting what you want, or you're not seeing what you want, you're just going to say, well, I don't really believe that data. He said, we didn't believe those temperatures. Well, based on what? And what he said, he basically was saying, well, there was a lot of data going around. Well, I don't know. I don't know. This is not my expertise, but I would think, like you said, those chemicals are protected by multiple shells, and the temperature is going down. And the temperature was going down at the time they detonated these cars. So there doesn't seem to be any smoking gun evidence that it was about to explode. And there was no explanation. A previous hearing, this was in February, the head of Pennsylvania's FEMA basically said, what changed overnight from one car is at risk on Sunday night of an uncontrolled explosion to 5. It just, none of it makes sense, because I think they're lying. And I think they wanted to blow up these chemicals because it would be quicker than having to meticulously extract the chemicals. And then you have the logistical issue of where are you sending these chemicals, or whatever the byproduct is. And
them having to probably foot that bill to pay for all that also.
Yeah. So it defies logic. And we didn't play the whole clip, but then he got into, well, we have 35 years of experience. Okay, well, that's fine, but there's a lot of politicians who are the most corrupt ghouls in the world with a lot of experience. So it makes no sense. You have basically the chemical evidence that they were not polymerizing, which brings us to, I think, the smoking gun. I think this guy would probably be the star witness in a prosecution, because if you're a first responder, an emergency responder, who would you want to lean on the most as far as the chemical you're most concerned about than the chemist who manufactured the chemical?
Yeah, absolutely.
The company that manufactures the vinyl chloride, which is used, it's used for PVC pipes, that people put in their homes or connected to your homes or businesses. But they sent a crew out, for the emergency, and they were there for technical advice. And apparently they were not included in communications with emergency responders. They were basically just kind of left out because they were telling Norfolk Southern, the cars are not polymerizing. And
Yeah.
when we use these big words, yeah, the cars are not at risk of exploding. That's what they were saying, basically.
Yep.
So let's play the manufacturer who, I mean, I think this is smoking gun and basically shows that this multi-billion-dollar company intentionally nuked this town, just saying, fuck it, it's flyover country. Nobody will notice.
My name is Paul Thomas, and I'm the Vice President of Health, Environment, Safety, and Security for Oxyvinyls. With me today is Steve Smith. He's a technical manager at our manufacturing facility in LaPorte, Texas. I first want to acknowledge the East Palestine community and those who participated in the response effort following the derailment of Norfolk Southern Train 32N in February of this year. We recognize the impact the derailment has had on your community, and we'd like to thank Chief Drabick and all of the first responders for their service. We look forward to addressing questions from the panel to the best of our ability. As a shipper that relies on railroads to safely transport our products, Oxyvinyl shares the agency's goal of investigating transportation incidents and taking steps to prevent a recurrence. In my opening comments, I would like to provide context regarding our involvement in the incident and summarize the technical support we provided to those handling the response. We were one of multiple shippers that had rail cars on train 32N. Specifically, 5 cars with our stabilized vinyl chloride monomer, or VCM, were on the train. The rail cars carrying Oxyvinyl's product did not initiate the derailment. Another car has been preliminarily identified as initiating the derailment when it suffered a wheel bearing failure. The cars carrying our product derailed because of that failure. 5 other companies had a combined total of 6 tank cars involved in the derailment that contained hazardous materials. Many of these rail cars breached upon derailing, which released their contents into the environment and fueled the initial fires at the derailment scene. The 5 tank cars carrying Oxyvinyl's product derailed without breaching. The pressure relief devices on all 5 cars operated as intended, preventing damage to the tanks by relieving the elevated pressures that were caused by the surrounding fires. On Saturday morning, February 4th, Oxyvinyls was notified of the train derailment that involved tank cars carrying our VCM product. Following the notification, Oxyvinyls activated its Special Situations team in Dallas. We sent a technical team to East Palestine, and we communicated with Norfolk Southern and its contractors regarding the properties of stabilized VCM. To my knowledge, no other shippers responded with this level of support. On Saturday evening, February 4th, representatives of Oxyvinyl spoke directly with representatives of Norfolk Southern and its emergency response contractors regarding conditions at the derailment site. We made it clear, based on our expertise of the chemical properties of our product, that stabilized VCM would be unlikely to spontaneously polymerize under the conditions described to us by Norfolk Southern and its contractors. Polymerization of VCM is a very exothermic reaction, which generates significant heat, resulting in increased pressure within its container. If that pressure is not relieved, it can cause a failure of the container. An uncontrolled VCM polymerization reaction would have an obvious temperature rise that would continue through the duration of the exothermic reaction. For this reason, we emphasize with Norfolk Southern and its contractors the importance of monitoring the temperature of the rail cars. And on Sunday morning, February 5th, we further reinforced our view that polymerization was not occurring during a call with Norfolk Southern representatives. As previously mentioned, Oxyvinyls had dispatched a 3-person team to Ohio in order to make certain that we had representatives on the ground who could serve as a resource to Norfolk Southern and those managing the response effort. My colleague on the panel, Steve Smith, led that team, and he arrived in East Palestine on the afternoon of Sunday, February the 5th. On Sunday evening, Steve met with Norfolk Southern's emergency response contractors and, for the 3rd time, stated Oxyvinyl's view that polymerization of VCM was not occurring. In summary, although our rail cars did not initiate the derailment and did not breach in the derailment, we provided technical support to Norfolk Southern and its emergency response contractors. We sent a team to Ohio to support Norfolk Southern's response effort, and we provided information regarding stabilized VCM.
Colin, we have another clip from him, right?
What we do is provide technical support with our experience in making the products that are involved in an incident. And, we're there to help drive the safety of those folks that are responding. We're there to equip them with all of our experience in making the product so that they can navigate through the decisions they need to on how to manage it with the best information on the product as we can give them. And the SDS is part of that, but certainly the SDS is a broad base documents covering manufacturing scenarios, industrial facilities, labs, storage, rail cars. And in all the sections you see that were referenced, there's always a reference to unless it's properly stabilized. And if you look at the transportation section 14, it talks about the rail cars being stabilized VCM. And in our case, the stabilized with low oxygen, some of the chemical inhibitors that they talked about can go away with fire, but when you stabilize it with oxygen, you don't lose the stabilization even in a fire. If the top space vents, it just fills up with more pure VCM, and so you don't have a potential for an initiator to get in. So these rail cars at 99.99% purity, we're giving that kind of information to the folks on the ground saying, hey, here's what we think it'll do. We're applying it to the specific details of their situation and really just trying to provide safety support on our product so that they can input into that VCM in order for there to be any potential of polymerization.
And I think you just answered the question, but maybe let's go into it a little deeper. How does stabilization protect vinyl chloride monomer at your headquarters? And so what questions came up about the oxyvinyl safety data sheet during your discussions with Norfolk Southern and its contractors, SPSI or SRS?
I don't think there were any specific questions to the document itself. I think, the conversations certainly were around polymerization, the concern on Saturday with rail car of concern at that time. So it's talking about the details without specifically referencing the document, if you will.
Was there anything in the safety data sheet that conflicted with the advice that you were providing to the folks on scene?
Not from my perspective, not for this incident with this scenario. I mean, that's the technical expertise. We had over 250 years of vinyl and PVC manufacturing experience on the phone. And so we're just trying to pull all of that knowledge to help the individuals that are on the ground.
All right. Well, please tell us some more about your communications with Norfolk Southern and its contractors. Who was your main point of contact there, and what sort of technical assistance did you provide to them?
So Saturday and Sunday, we had conference calls. And so there was a special situations team, as I mentioned, that we formed in Dallas. And we had several folks calling in that weren't in the room, in the special situations room. But we had phone calls on Saturday, and we had a conference call Sunday morning. And then Mr. Smith arrived Sunday afternoon with a couple other folks to really just be a resource on the ground to help support them in whatever way that he could.
And so what did you or your oxyvinyls team understand, given the information provided by the organizations on scene? What did you understand about what was happening with the tank cars?
Yeah, so through at least the two calls, what we understood is what was well described by Mr. McCarty earlier. There was a lot of concern about one of the rail cars in the pool fire that had gone off. I believe my recall was 30 seconds every 2 minutes for 8 or 10 hours through the evening. So it had really been working in that pool fire. And then all of the relief devices went off, and it went off again for 60 or 70 minutes. And I think he had mentioned they were getting materials together to do a hot tap. And then that one went off, and it gave them pause. So our initial guidance was, we didn't think that was polymerization, but, here's how you know. If you can go take a temperature on a rail car, you'll know for sure. And when you're putting people's lives at risk around the rail cars, you need to know for sure. Certainly, we're all on the same mission on that front.
So, yeah, was there a consensus amongst your team at Oxyvinyls in Dallas as to, what was going to, as far as the chemical behavior of the vinyl chloride monomer, were there any differing opinions on what was going to happen?
Not on the phone calls we had. I mean, we were trying to communicate. We didn't believe polymerization was going on. But more importantly, I think what we told them is how they could know for sure. Right? Don't take my opinion for it when it's your safety at risk. You go prove to yourself if it's safe to get a temperature, as they well described. You would know for sure because these reactions are extremely exothermic. And if you're talking about rupturing a rail car, you're talking about being at 320 degrees. And you can take that temperature anywhere on the rail car skin and know you got a problem. So it's a long way to go, and it will be very obvious if you have that reaction going on.
So the temperature trend that we had on the screen earlier, what does that tell you about about polymerization?
Yeah, so my understanding is that for that rail car on the west end, one, our view when it was described, that rail car was leaning against a PVC car that had heat, smoldering fires going on. And I think I read in Chief Drabick's notes that, maybe around midnight when they had that fire erupt near it, the temperature had dropped, the fire erupt kind of near it, it heated up to 139, they put the fire out, and it immediately dropped to, back to 129. So that trend of 12 degrees, over 22 hours of monitoring, that also corresponds with a 20 PSI drop in pressure in the car. It's conclusive to all of us that polymerization was not going on in that car. And the location where they were taking the temperature on the skin is valid enough to draw that conclusion.
Is that what you told Norfolk Southern and its contractors?
We never actually had conversations about the trends. The two data points that we had Sunday night was the 135 and 138. And so, what we knew with the first two data points was that at 135 or 138, shooting at the spot where he had, fell to the rail car, we felt confident we were on the skin. At that temperature, the pressure in that rail car is 121 pounds. So safety valve on that car is 247, design is 300, and a burst pressure 750. Point being, it's got a long, long ways to go from 135 degrees to present any threat of overpressurization, which was certainly a concern for everybody on the scene.
And how much of that did you tell Norfolk Southern?
Well, we weren't on the call once we got the data. The way the communication was going at that point, Mr. Smith was talking to the folks on scene once he arrived, and then he came back and brought concerns to us about the temperatures. And so we gave that information to Mr. Smith, and he went back and advised them again that polymerization wasn't occurring per our perspective, that you didn't have the temperature to support it. But, he would have to answer, or the others.
So a lot of big words, but in a nutshell, you had people on the ground there. You had people in Dallas, the manufacturer saying this is nowhere near explosion or heating up to the point of explosion. It seems like Norfolk Southern was looking for an emergency that did not exist.
Yep. I mean, after listening to that, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out they purposely detonated those cars in order to speed up the cleanup process. There's no other way of looking at it. There absolutely is. And it actually kind of makes sense looking at the evidence of the reports that were given and Norfolk Southern ordering the pullback of the crews. I mean, to me, that doesn't make any sense either. In a firefighter standpoint, I at least would have had my crew set up a manless water monitor, aka a deck gun, to consistently keep a water flow cooling down those rail cars. And again, it doesn't take any manpower. You set up a deck gun, it's supported by weights, and it basically just keeps water flowing into those rail cars. To me, again, that sounds like that's just more evidence of them knowing what they wanted to do prior to making the decision. And I mean, everything just leads up to they wanted to speed up the process of getting the chemicals out of there and getting that rail line back up and running. There's no question in my mind.
Bottom line, I mean, you're not a lawyer or anything like that, but it seems like there's evidence here that, you could make the case that sometimes you just make a poor decision, but it's not intentional. But it does seem like there's evidence. Like, why was there this buffer between the manufacturing of the car and its people on the ground? Why was the manufacturer of the car not in the emergency meetings? That doesn't really make sense to me. It seems like there would be, from not stopping the car when you had evidence that there were sparks, not stopping the car when the bearing was overheating and failing. Do you think there needs to be, criminal prosecution here?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. Somebody from Norfolk Southern absolutely needs to be held accountable for this. I mean, there's no excuse for this. I mean, yeah, they can throw all the money in the world at the people of East Palestine and Western PA, but that's not going to solve the cancer issues that are going to be coming down the road. I mean, that's not going to magically heal these people. I mean, what would happen? Like, speaking of mass transportation, anytime there's a commercial airline crash or something like that, if there's any type of negligence that is proven on the pilot or the crew, and there's deaths on board, even injuries, I mean, those pilots and that crew are held accountable for that stuff. I mean, just because you weren't on the train doesn't mean that it wasn't your decision to, force these people to keep on going and negate the fact that, you have damaged parts on this train and you allowed it to continue on down the track. There's no excuse for that. Absolutely no excuse for that.
Absolutely. And your thoughts also on the EPA's part in this, because they, from the beginning, have pushed this narrative of a controlled burn, which I've never heard of such a thing. And they started moonwalking away from it. We broke earlier in the week. We got video showing that an EPA official who's been on the ground there in East Palestine, he didn't know he was being recorded, so he was accidentally told the truth. He basically said the same thing that the manufacturer said, that we didn't see any evidence of stress. He said in 4 of the 5 cars. So, take that for what it's worth. Maybe they did think one of the cars was at risk. But now they won't. I asked the EPA for comment. They got back to me this morning just with a canned statement, but they won't answer the specific questions, because this was also, not only did they not have to detonate these cars, but they also did it in a prohibited way with no pollution control. So I think from the company to the EPA, maybe different degrees of culpability, but it's the same thing with Flint. If nobody's held accountable for what was done in Flint, Michigan, why should any government agency or governor or mayor or city council member think twice to take the same actions elsewhere? And why would a railroad think twice if they're all going to get away with it here?
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, honestly, the same thing happened at 3 Mile Island also during the almost meltdown that happened there. I mean, that was a giant cover up too. They tried to negate the fact that they were, literally minutes away from completely destroying that entire section of the United States. And, they played down the contamination that was being put on to the residents. And still to this day, there's people who are sick in that area from everything that went on. I mean, it's unreal. It's unreal. And people need to start being held accountable for this. And it pisses me off the most. I mean, I know I'm living here in Myrtle Beach, but I still have friends and family that live up there that I care dearly about. And their lives are damn near destroyed because of this.
Well, that was going to be my that was going to be my last question, because honestly, the residents who obviously we have to be concerned about, but from a first responder point of view, police were also on the scene, so not just firefighters. Why would anyone want to be a volunteer firefighter if you're going to be lied to about? I mean, obviously you're taking a risk by the nature of the job, but there's degrees of risk, and you want to know all the facts so you could wear the proper equipment. If you're a volunteer firefighter, maybe you don't want to go out on this particular call, whatever the case may be is, who would want to be let me rephrase, who would want to be a volunteer anything if companies could just lie to you and basically poison you, the first responders, and no one is held accountable? Obviously the residents too, but specifically first responders.
Absolutely. I mean, speaking obviously from experience, I mean, it takes a special individual to want to voluntarily, especially, go into situations like this. But for, future recruitment of people, and I know volunteers, especially in that region, are hurting big time. You're absolutely right. What type of motivation do they have if you have in the back of your head that you're going to be responding to a situation that you're getting lied to, and you're going to be exposed to chemicals and stuff that you could potentially bring home to your family, and everything like that. I mean, it's criminal. It's absolutely criminal.
Thanks, man, for taking so much time. Jack Vankirk was with the Chippewa, Pennsylvania Fire Department for 14 years. Like you said, you know the fire chief, so glad we got some information, because I think, without knowing, he's been kind of thrown under the bus, so it's good to get
And that's
from your
again,
perspective.
that's
that
another
he's
sad thing that just upsets me in that situation.
absolutely. All right, man, take care.
Yes, sir. You too.
So, the question is, where from here? We're not going to stop covering this. Lewis is right now on a much-deserved vacation, but when he gets back, I'm sure he's going to be chomping at the bit to address these things. We're hoping we could send him back there next month. Not going to lie, we need some help. So definitely, if you're not yet a Status Coup member, consider signing up. That's statuscoup.com/join. A lot of the reason we've been able to break these stories before this hearing, because we broke a lot of the information showing that Norfolk Southern intentionally did this, and there was no reason to detonate these cars over the last few months, thanks to Lewis reporting on the ground in East Palestine 3 different times. Lewis and I have been talking to residents pretty much every day on the phone, digging into these things. Because to me, like in the case of Flint, this is not only about East Palestine. It's not only about Pennsylvania. It's about the entire country. Do you want to be a country where your government or corporate America or both working together can poison its citizens and then just sweep it under the rug and cover the whole thing up? It's happening. It happened in Flint. It's happening here. It's happened in Kalamazoo, which I've been covering with the toxic paper mill. God knows what Native Americans have gone through for hundreds of years here. Generally poor black and brown people, where they dump these corporations that dump their waste on poor and black communities in the water that they drink. Now poor, low-income white areas. It's really across shades, races right now. Seems to be a class issue at this point. I don't think this would be the reaction if first of all, trains aren't going through wealthy areas, but I certainly don't think this would have been the reaction if this was a higher income area. I think they would have taken a lot more precautions and a lot more care before making a decision to nuke the fucking town. That I know for sure. But we want to continue covering it because we see what's going on, folks. Do you see any of the media outlets that did a quick write-up yesterday from these hearings, understating the whole thing, saying, hearings beg questions or produce questions on whether Norfolk Southern needed to detonate the cars? So most of the outlets kind of minimized or softened what actually came out. No, what actually came out is the actual manufacturer of the damn toxic chemical said they didn't need to do this. That's basically what was said. That should be the headline. It should be leading the newscast. I'm sorry to the submarine watchers. I'm sorry, tragically, that people lost their lives. We're talking about 5 people who willingly went on a submarine. We're talking about a town of almost 5,000, not to mention all the other people outside of East Palestine who forever are going to have their lives tainted. And unfortunately, you're going to have a lot of people with cancer, among other things. So, not to mention the kids who are sick. So we're going to continue covering this. Please support us if you can. $5 to $10 a month. There's a lot of outlets out there that ask you to give them money and sign up for Patreon. And generally, they're just doing kind of a musical chairs of the same bullshit topics over and over. We're actually investigating and we're actually getting out there. So please, statuscoup.com/join. Let me read the super chats. Thank you so much. Christina, 499 pounds. Thank you across the pond. Great work, Jordan. Keep it going. Appreciate that. Teresa, $5 sticker. Thank you. Nancy, $49.99 sticker. Thank you so much. That is really generous. Caitlin, $10. Light is the best disinfectant. Couldn't agree more. We got to keep the attention on these things. As you can see, these are not the topics that necessarily go viral on YouTube. But these are the topics that matter. This is life or death. This is a criminal corporate cover-up. Let me repeat, a criminal corporate cover-up in the United Corporations of America. Maybe I'm naive. I don't really know what's more important than our government allowing corporations to poison the citizenry and nothing be done. We need a lot more than a massive record-setting fine here. People need to go behind bars. Frankly, the residents, not just in East Palestine, but surrounding areas who've been affected, they need to be provided lifetime health care for free. That would be Medicare for all, or whatever you want to call it. They also need, paid by the government or Norfolk Southern, independent testing for the rest of their lives for vinyl chloride and other contaminant levels. Residents who want to relocate need that paid for. And the difference between the money they're losing on their house, because their home values have gone way down since this happened, that needs to be paid for by the company. I mean, there's many other things that need to be done, but that's for starters. You know, temporarily reimbursing for hotels is not enough. And when I hear the EPA and Norfolk Southern say, yeah, we'll be done with this whole thing in August. I mean, we're basically almost in July, so we're talking about a month and a half. We'll be done with the cleanup in August. What then? First of all, you're not done with the cleanup. You have contaminants in there that they're just pretending aren't there. Why are children peeing blood? I spoke with a mother whose kid was peeing blood. Why are adults having blood coming out of their asses? Residents are dizzy still, burning eyes, sore throat, tongue and lips tingling, crippling fatigue. I mean, in all the stories I've done and Lewis has done, we have the long list of ailments. It's going to be done in August? Why? Because that's when you remove all the soil? What about the groundwater? What about the residents who have rashes still on their body from city water, not wells? They're on the city water. This is the company. This is the EPA. This is the Republican governor. This is the Democratic president who hasn't even gone there, much less done anything. We got an EPA official, by the way. We broke it earlier in the week. Go to our Substack, statuscoup.substack.com. You could read the story for free. Please share it. He didn't know he was being recorded, so he accidentally told the truth. He said, yeah, this was an open burn. Open burn meaning a detonation of toxic cancer-causing chemicals with no pollution control. He admitted it casually, which totally contradicts the EPA. The EPA has been saying for almost 5 months, this was a controlled burn. He also said, we didn't see any stress in these cars. Can you imagine if like Chernobyl happened and nothing happened after that? It was just like, all right, let's go on with our lives. I don't think it's too dramatic to say this is a mini Chernobyl. Not at all. And the independent people who have tested the air, the soil, and water are finding much higher levels of contamination than the EPA, which seems to be a consistent thing. I give you Flint, Michigan, who doesn't have clean water, and it's almost a decade. Next year will be a decade since the Flint water crisis. So I'm telling you, folks, again, it's not the sexiest topic. We're lucky if we break 200, 300 viewers on these kind of stories. I'd do a lot better if I just went after Joe Rogan or some reactionary right-winger or somebody in all caps. I'd get 1,000 live viewers. But we're talking life or death, and we're talking corporate criminal cover-ups. And why it matters? The people in East Palestine on February 2nd didn't think this was going to happen to them. What makes you think something like this ain't going to happen to you or your loved ones? Whether it's trains, water, plants going on fire, tankers exploding, driving. We've seen it all, folks. Please, please, please go to our Substack. Read what I went through is actually a story. I don't know if you could show it on screen, Colin. It's our latest Substack story that I published this morning. It has the 5 bombshells. I think if you want to share it with friends or family, it goes through it, bang, bang, bang. Here are the top 5 bombshells with the video clips. So we need to make more people aware about what's going on. So share it. You could sign up for our Substack for free. We do have a paid option too. But please, please, if you're not yet a Status Coup member, please consider signing up. StatusCoup.com/join. We just got a new member. Welcome, Luke. Just signed up. So that's statuscoup.com/join. You could sign up for $5 to $10 a month. $5 a month equals 16 cents a day. $10 a month equals 33 cents a day. Next week, Tina and Colin are going back to Atlanta to cover the continued fight against Cop City. There's another week of action starting. So Tina's going back there for the second time. That costs money. Right now, I'm working on possibly going there, possibly going somewhere. I don't have it fully confirmed yet. So yeah, definitely support us if you can. These trips cost money. We are kind of down financially at the moment because we just spent $15,000 on getting a brand new live view. Well, it's a used live view, but it's only a year old and it was expensive. So now we have 2 live views, which will technically allow us to go live in multiple cities and cover, possibly do more than one on the ground reporting trip at once. But that also costs a lot more money. So we need people. If you want more on the ground reporting, step up, statuscoup.com/join. 5 o'clock Eastern. So in an hour and a half, come back. Tina will be live with a guest. They're going to go through the latest with RFK Jr. Apparently, you are part of the establishment if you attack or criticize RFK Jr., or you are in league with Big Pharma if you point out that RFK Jr. is a lunatic who pushes fact-free bullshit constantly. So Tina is going to be going through his latest. That's at 5 o'clock Eastern. Among other things she'll be going through. Come back in an hour and a half. Tina Desiree Berg will be live with a guest focusing on RFK and his latest gems and conspiracies. See you then.